Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, robot, and loin streamer, and today it is LMIAY time. That is the first video of the month. It's always devoted to you guys, where I give you a prompt, you submit a short story to me or an excerpt, and we check out how talented all of y'all are. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on this channel, check out the links down in the description below, LMIAY and Fresh Meat feature. And then number three, if you would like to check out any of my creative works, those are all down in the description under the link tree. If you decide to check them out, I hope you have a good time. So with that said, let's get into the prompts, the submissions, and the creativity. The prompt was, a character is approaching a house that belongs to someone they don't know. Oh, I am so excited for this. And the first entry is Egao Chan. I have very much enjoyed everything Egao Chan has submitted, so I'm very excited to see what they do. Oh, and I just thought of what we might be able to do for the for next month. Oh. Okay, I hope you guys have a good time with that. It's down in the description if you want to check it out, take part in it maybe. Let's get into it. Egao Chan's story is titled Bad Buns. It was an early morning, and Lou was standing on the side of an almost empty street by a breakfast shop with a gentle old man with only a few gray hairs on his head. He was this old man's only customer, and the owner seemed quite happy that he was here to buy his steamed buns. "You're not from around here?" The old man smiled as he picked two bigger ones from the steamer and put them in a small plastic bag. "What brings you here?" "I'm a reporter," Lou smiled as he looked at the two-story house half hidden behind trees at the end of the street beyond the corner. "I'm a reporter," Lou smiled as he looked at the two-story house half hidden behind trees at the end of the street around the corner. "I'm here to do a story." "A story?" The old man seemed confused and slightly put off. "What story? We're a quiet little place." "It's the missing family in that house." Lou pointed at the house at which he could not stop staring. "Do you happen to know anything about it, sir?" "That house, The old man hesitated for a brief moment, then sighed and shook his head. "No, not much, and I'd like to stay that way." "I'd suggest you stay away as well. It's full of bad omens. Very, very, very bad. I'd move further if I could afford it." "Oh, really?" Lou turned to the old man with curious tone and a smile. "What else do you know?" "I can't help you with that. Like I said, don't even go near it. Go chat with the local police or something. Everyone's afraid of that place." The old man let out a long and tired sigh. Then he threw a small pack of hot sauce into the plastic bag with the steamed buns. "You like hot sauce? It goes very well with the buns. Enjoy." Lou took the buns and started heading toward the house anyway. If anything, what the old man had said only made him more intrigued and excited. It seemed there was indeed a fascinating story. If he could get this one done, he would finally one-up the editor's pet in the department's try-hard Erica, his bitter rival in the office. The hot sauce indeed went well with the buns. Lou would never call himself a foodie, but even he nodded at the air while chewing and swallowing. The air seemed to grow slightly colder the closer he got to the house, and the heat from the buns and the hot sauce helped quite a bit in keeping him warm. The shops and stores close to the house seemed either terribly run down or completely abandoned, even more so than the rest of the street. With a closer position, he could see through the untrimmed trees in the yard, the dusty windows taped shut from inside, the tightly locked front gate, the crooked branches near the windows, and a roof covered in broken tiles and some kind of black tar. For one moment, he thought he saw someone standing by the window, but then he was sure that it was just a shadow. This better be good. Lou raised his camera, but just as he was about to take a picture, his stomach churned and growled. "What the f—" A sudden wave of pain and disgust radiated from his stomach to his arms and legs. His mouth opened up almost by intuition as a warm and burning flow of thick liquid gushed from his esophagus. All he could do before dropping to his knees was raise his camera above his head to protect it from the spill, but the same could not be said about his shirt and pants. The next morning, Lou dragged his exhausted body and sore limbs into the office. What was worse than spending most of yesterday and almost the entire night in the hospital from acute food poisoning was when he heard that Erica had taken the assignment to cover the story the moment she heard he was in the hospital. It was a low move, but not something she would refuse. Before settling down in his seat, his phone rang. It was none other than Erica. "What? You're here to gloat? Why didn't you go?" Erica sounded like she was weeping. "What? Why didn't you go?" Erica's voice was trembling. "Look, if this was some kind of new way of trolling me, you should give it a rest. Why didn't you go?" Erica screamed. Her voice was breaking and her tone became desperate, but Lou just hung up without hesitation. "Bitch." Lou shook his head. Maybe since it was a slow news week, and he had done a ton of additional homework while he was in the hospital, he could still do the story and beat her to it. He just needed to convince the editor. "Sir, I want to talk to you about the house story." Lou almost bumped into the doorframe when he came into the editor's office. "Erica already went last night. You should pick another." The editor didn't even look at him. No, it's my story." Lou sat in the chair in front of the editor's desk. "She's never going to do as good of a story as I'm going to do. I've done way more research than anyone, and I have several locals willing to talk to me. Please, I can have everything at your desk before lunch." "She promised me that she would have it this morning," the editor sighed. "She's still not here, is she?" Lou raised his voice. "And you know what? She might even need my help on this. She just called me and..." "She called you?" Before Lou could answer, the phone on the editor's desk started ringing, along with Lou's phone in his pocket. "You see?" He showed his phone to the editor. It was Erica again. "Why didn't you go?" It was Erica's voice, coming from the editor's desk phone, desperate and terrified, just like before. Oof. Oh, I have the shivers. I want to know more about this story. I gotta see. Give me a second. Contemporary novel. We got a contemporary novel attached. Oh, well, Egao Chan is on Royal Roads. Not this story, but he is so good at the vibes. He, she, they. So good at the vibes. Especially the spooky vibes, because I remember before also doing spooky vibes. Be in for the story. But I want to know, Erica, what is going on? What is going on with this house? Clearly, that bun maker was trying to protect you. Excellent job. The next story is by Flies Are Eyes. "Stop doing that. You'll lick yourself bald," her human would say. Years earlier, Fluffy learned to lick between her claws, and she got so good at it that she couldn't stop. The large gray cat cleaned for hours on end, and many times would roll over on her back without removing her foot from her mouth. With dirty fur, nothing tasted better, and being an outside cat meant Fluffy had plenty to clean about. Her coat was thick, and as poofy as she was, fresh soil was the only way that she remained cool during long summer naps. Late evening hours were always the best. Some nights, Fluffy chatted with wild raccoons and opossums who wandered into her yard looking for food. On other nights, she might meet up with her gang and they'd roam the neighborhoods looking for action. Because she was the bravest, Fluffy was the leader of her gang, and while she always made plans for the group's night ahead, this night was a special night. It was her birthday, and her gang had something planned. They had told her about a special place, a place packed with a promise of fun-filled mischief and fond memories. Well, whatever comprised memories as far as cats were concerned. Being the first to arrive, Sheba strutted up the driveway. Her brown tail waved in the air behind her. It was obvious that she had escaped her home, because it was unusual for Sheba to make appearances. Even being declawed, the lanky cat always considered herself the toughest of the group. They breed Siamese cats for fighting, she would always say, looking into the sky as if watching invisible birds. "So?" Fluffy would reply between licks, too busy enjoying the flavor of her toes to waste her effort arguing. Hours later, the sun fell, pulling dusk along with it. The entire gang had arrived. They laid on the driveway, 7 cats in total, confident in their numbers, but willing to bolt at the slightest hint of trouble. "Look at that bitch across the street!" one of the gang shouted as she scraped her claws on the tree. Bitch was a Jack Russell, and she was so busy pulling a human down the sidewalk she didn't notice the ratty cats making fun of her. Everyone but Fluffy laughed at the weird tiny dog with weird tiny strides. After the entire pride had gathered, Fluffy stopped licking, drawing the gang's attention. They waited as she lowered her leg and blinked a few times. A strong wind spooked Fluffy. She ran, and the pack followed. Fluffy sprinted to the neighbor's house, slipping between a tight hole in the fence, an escape route used many times. After sprinting into the backyard, she slowed, and the group overtook her, assuming the lead. "Where are we going?" Fluffy asked. "Remember that house where the humans always leave the door open? Well, you'll see," Sheba said. "I have a surprise for you." Sheba nursed an expression Fluffy could not decipher. For the longest time, Sheba wanted to rule the gang, but she lacked the claws to challenge Fluffy. In all ways Fluffy could not define, Sheba's cunning made Fluffy nervous. Fluffy knew the Siamese cat was unhinged, but was she unhinged enough to commit violence? Sheba was brilliant if not fierce. Fluffy never trusted her. Was this the night that Sheba would make her move? The Fluffy gang passed Oreo's house. Oreo was the most uncouth tomcat in the area, and his obscene gestures were beyond reproach. Once he accosted the girls, and Fluffy bit his ear so hard she kept a chunk for her troubles. Oreo rued the day he challenged Fluffy, and now he sat on the porch pretending not to see the gang. Off in the distance, light illuminated the evening sky. At night, the world became more alive, more expansive, as everyone's eyes adjusted with nocturnal vision. The pride ran over and under hedges, snaking around fences while dodging tires. Group mentality gripped them. The primal instinct smothered 100 generations of domestication as they terrorized the neighborhood. Hearing the weirdest sound ever, Fluffy slowed with puzzlement. Cats never meowed at one another, but on this night, Sheba let one rip. "Meow," Sheba said. What's her deal? Fluffy wondered. Their destination waited at the end of the cul-de-sac. Bugs flew around the porch light, an occasional tinkling sound. Their destination waited at the end of the cul-de-sac. Bugs flew around the porch light. An occasional tingling sound pealed from sparkling wind chimes hanging nearby. The gang froze, allowing their furry leader time to catch up. Standing next to Fluffy, Sheba glared at the wide-open front door. 5 pounds of catnip sit in this house. More than you could imagine. Well, we'll just have to take all of it, I suppose, Fluffy said, starting toward the porch with the group following. Sheba's eyes were frenzied with betrayal, but too preoccupied with tactics. Fluffy failed to notice. The gang approached the final few steps to the entryway when Sheba stopped the others with her clawless paw. "Wait here," she whispered. The pride watched as Fluffy entered the dwelling, unaware that she was alone. Inside, the smell of cigars and stale beer hung in the damp air. Fluffy walked deeper into the home, reaching the main hallway leading to the back bedrooms. Light spilled from the opened doorway, projecting long streaks across the floor. Sounds of empty bottles clanked in trash cans, while laughter mixed with the drunken bellows of louts raising hell in the dim-lit bedroom. Timid steps led Fluffy to the last few feet. She paused before rounding the door's threshold. Without warning, she sprang into the room, hoping to ambush whomever was inside with her gang as backup. A large table sat in the middle of the room. It was a poker pit, filled with a cornucopia of mangy mutts and curs playing poker. The dealer stopped passing cards and glared at Fluffy, drawing the rest's attention. Fluffy unsheathed her claws and ordered her gang to attack, but she was alone. Looking over her shoulder, she cursed Sheba. Oh, Sheba, you set her up. Never trust a cat that has a name that's almost a dog's name. Because this is Sheba. I don't know if that was done on purpose, but never trust an enemy cat, let alone a cat with a dog's name. I hope your battles with the bobcat were enough to prepare you for this betrayal. Because doesn't sound good. Sounds like a lot of big dogs. I love that you made this from an animal's perspective and an animal story. Great job. The next story is by Gordon Hammer. Louis awoke in the void. He couldn't remember when it had taken him, but now everything was pitch black and he couldn't breathe. He seemed stuck to the wall behind him, and attempting to move to the right or left proved fruitless. Several times he'd bumped his forehead into the cold wall in front of his face, casting stars. He felt nauseous and his head was full with vertigo, his eyes unable to rest, wandering around in their sockets, seeking an anchor where there was none. His lungs screamed and his heart kicked in his chest. The last he remembered, he'd been in his apartment, idly thumbing a 357 in his jacket pocket and picking Honey Nut Cheerios from between his teeth and watching cartoons through a haze of smoke, trying not to pry at the open wound of the memory. Don't play with that. Most suburbs have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, Louis. That toy has sharp edges that'll cut you. You have to hold the pipe in your mouth and the screen with one hand to keep the rock in the pipe and the lighter with your other. So you'd be driving with your knees, Louis. Just wait till you get home. Put it away. Pretend it never happened. Why didn't you wait? Never happened. Glancing up through the windshield, crystalline suburban nightmare just before noon, at the top of a little blonde head in front of the car. No time to stop. Bump. Louis lurched forward involuntarily and slammed his forehead again, hard. A vision burst before his eyes and his stomach lurched. He saw a room with white walls and a rich little fat man smiling, standing next to a bronze statue of a corpse, horribly contorted, decapitated, belly up, back arched, feet and neck stump pressed to the floor. Louis bent over and vomited. Brilliant streams of neon pink and blue and red and gold poured from his mouth and splashed onto the floor. Louis fell to his knees, sweat dripping from his forehead. Behind the fat man and the statue, a small child sat huddled in the corner, naked, crying, and bloodied. Louis, hacking and dry-heaving at this point, reached for the man, but his fingers hit an invisible metal barrier. With his right hand, he patted his pocket and, to his delight, found that the revolver was still there. Terrence held his hand to his mouth, yawning again. La Boheme serenaded him from the car stereo. Marty, watching the road wind along the mountainous cliffside, jumped as the Buick began to veer toward the edge. He glanced at Terrence, saw the yawn and the drooping in his eyes, and shot out a fist, punching him in his shoulder. Shit! Startled, Terrence gripped the steering wheel tighter and glanced at the older man. What the fuck, Marty? What'd you do that for? Marty turned to him, wide-eyed. You were falling asleep, you prick. I wasn't. Marty jabbed a finger to the console on the dash. The CD popped out and he grabbed it exactly the way he always did, the way that Terrence hated, fingers on the front and back, smudging it. He waggled the CD at Terrence. No fucking Piscini. No more fucking areas. He tossed the CD into the back seat, straightened his suit, and fiddled with his tie. And we're trading seats at the next stop. I'm driving, you sleepy-eyed son of a bitch. Fine, Terrence muttered. There was a loud thump from the trunk. You know, that little poof took something, Marty grumbled, pulling a tuft of lint off one of the arms of his suit. What? Marty gestured behind them. The fuckhead in the trunk. He took something, for we grabbed him. Terrence shook his head. What are you talking about? He was out of his mind and drooling. It was the easiest grab we ever... He shot a nervous glance over his shoulder. Did we not check that fuck? Marty scoffed. No, you idiot. I mean, yeah, that's what I meant. He was on something. Drooling, PCP, angel dust, I don't know. A gunshot roared from behind them. Through the back windshield, Marty spotted a hole on the top of the trunk. Did we not check him? Terrence asked, again, terrified. A portion of the back seat exploded, followed by Terrence's headrest, followed by Terrence's head. The car swerved to the right and slipped off the edge of the cliff. Tony ducked beneath a wooden beam in the low ceiling, hands behind his back. He couldn't stop smiling. He loved these moments just before they broke down. He watched hungrily as the young boy trembled in the corner of his attic. Hey, Cookie, Tony cooed. There's no one for miles, you know that? Do you know where we are? There's no one coming to help ya. But I want you to try, okay? The child continued to weep uncontrollably. Tony clapped his hands. "Come on! Give us a scream! Scream for help, huh?" In a meek, hoarse whisper, in the midst of a sob, the boy said, "Please, please, help me." And silence followed. Tony laughed, clapping again, backing up. He began to take off his suit. "That was nice," he chuckled. "I loved that." It was at this point that a burgundy Buick Lasbury came crashing through the roof, crushing Tony beneath its bumper, taking bits of his corpse with it as it continued crashing down several floors. The young boy blinked, unsure of what had just happened. He wiped the tears from his eyes and shakily stood to his feet. Hello?" There was no answer. "Help?" he called out again, louder this time. Somewhere in the house, a telephone rang. Gingerly, the young boy began to climb down the hole. I feel like this is the start. This is just the start. Like if you're watching a movie and you have like before the credits, not necessarily a prologue, but sort of like a prologue for what's going to be something bigger, maybe a time skip with the boy that's become something, maybe a journalist. I feel like I'm on a freelance journalist, freelance photographer binge right now, specific binge. I should say, what's the word that I want? Starts with an A. It's an I. An inclination at the moment. And I've had it for a couple of weeks because of a story I was reading. I haven't been reading it in the last couple of weeks, but I'm still like, I like that character. I kind of want to do more of that, have more of that. I think Harrison almost started becoming like that, which isn't going to work but I digress. I am into this. That's why I could see this character like having a time skip and seeing where they go as an adult because of the situation that they had as a kid, where there was this immaculate moment of being saved from obviously something terrible about to happen, if it hadn't happened already, at least before. I want to know what happens next. Gordon, is this part of something like the beginning, trying something new? Is it part of something that already exists? Are you not planning to do anything with it? That's one of my favorite things about the LMIAYs. I don't know if any of you guys like just do smaller portions or like or like come up with these small things and then go, ooh, I want to use that for a bigger thing because now I'm inspired with this brand new idea. I don't know, but I hope that some of these actually spawn larger ideas, the ones that don't fit comfortably in like a small thing, so that then there's more story to read later. I don't know. I always just hope that something good comes out of everything. Because y'all are so full of interesting concepts that you present and strong characters. Like that specifically, I really liked the pacing and the style of the narration. There is such a tension in the way that you write, Gordon, that very specifically stood through. You do like the long sentences, but and the way that you use commas very specifically and like fragments in places, the narration holds such a tension that is really fun to read. At least it's the kind of thing that I love to read. The last story is by RSAlessi. Jane tucked her hair behind her ear. "Stop," she told herself. "It makes you look insecure." Command presence was everything in her job. She tugged at her tactical vest. Shit. More insecurity. The front door of the apartment was painted red, cheerful and welcoming. The homeowner had arranged potted plants on either side, shade-loving succulents that made the concrete landing homey and welcoming. Jane had been in this complex before, other calls, and homey was not a word she normally associated with it. She lifted her fist, one knock, loud and firm, then another. She held her breath and listened. A small part of her hoped no one would answer. Then she could go back in her patrol car and roam the neighborhood, being that positive police presence people kept talking about. Footsteps drew close, then stopped. The deadbolt creaked its metallic protest, and the door slowly swung inward. "Can I help you, officer?" The voice was deep and musical, Irish perhaps. The man attached to it was barely taller than her. He was broad through his shoulders and built like those guys in the kilts who tossed telephone poles. "I need to ask you a few questions." Jane stopped herself before she could add, "If you don't mind." Never give them options, her sergeant always told her. "Do you have a warrant?" he asked. "No, sir. This is a preliminary investigation." "What for?" If the guy thought that he was going to put her on the defensive, he was wrong. I'm investigating the disappearance of Mr. Alexander Tate, white male, late 20s, 6 foot. I know Xander. He's not missing. He's my roommate. Jane's mouth fell open. She snapped it shut. Is he here now? Yeah, he's in the shower. How are you willing to wait? Yeah, I need to see him in person to close the case. Jane expected the man to let her in, but instead he stepped onto the landing and shut the door behind him. You haven't introduced yourself, she said. Neither have you. She laughed. Right, I'm Officer Dewey. He extended his hand. John. She already knew his name because she'd spoken to the property manager yesterday. It's nice to meet you. She accepted his hand. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her fingertips. The pleasure's mine. Heat flooded her cheeks, outrage and embarrassment. John smirked and winked at her. Breathing deep, she squared her shoulders and forced a smile. So how did you meet Mr. Tate? I saved his life. Oh, what happened? John's smile tightened. It's none of your business. Jane fought the urge to adjust her tactical vest, make sure it was straight with everything in its place. Instead, she willed her fingers to touch the pale stripes running down each pant leg, just how her sergeant told her to do when she got fidgety. Are you new at this? John asked. It's none of your business. Touché. Here's Xander now. He stepped aside as the door opened, revealing an attractive young man who looked every bit the privileged frat boy of his Tinder selfies. Mr. Xander Tate, I'm Officer Dewey. She glanced sidelong at John, now impassive as a chunk of granite. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Xander grinned and raised his hand. I didn't do it, officer, I swear. A smile like that could melt butter, and it melted Jane just a little. I'm afraid you did this time, she said. You've been out of touch from your friends and family for a week. What's going on? Xander's grin faded, and he peeked at John. I found a new gig. It's been taking up all of my time. Yes, you left a prominent law firm with hardly any notice. I called around. You haven't taken employment with any of the rival firms in town. I'm working with John now. She knew from her investigation that John was a lawyer at a rival firm, a partner, in fact, and Xander was not on their payroll. What kind of work are you doing? He stole another peek at John. I'm John's personal assistant. Jane glanced between the two men, and a new explanation suggested itself. Is this some kind of sex thing? Xander coughed, and John arched an eyebrow. No, ma'am, Xander managed to choke out. You don't have to tell her anything, John said. Jane caught John's emphasis. He didn't want Xander answering questions. Go back inside, sir. This doesn't involve you. As you wish. John turned and walked into the apartment. Don't be long, Xander, he said over his shoulder. I'll have dinner ready in a few minutes. Jane waited for the door to close behind John before she addressed Xander. If anything bad's going on, tell me. I can help you. Xander opened his mouth, then shut it. He shook his head and stared at his feet. Jane grimaced. She'd put a lot of work into this investigation, but she couldn't do anything with an uncooperative victim. Here's my number, she said, passing him her card. Call me if you change your mind. Yes, ma'am. Oh, and call your mother. She's worried sick. Xander flushed. Yes, ma'am. As soon as the deadbolt clicked shut behind Xander, Jane pressed her ear to the door. Did I do okay? That was Xander. Yes, John's voice answered. Go to your room. I'll call you when dinner's ready. Jane frowned. If Xander was really John's personal assistant, he should be making dinner. And why did John want a live-in assistant? Something was wrong here. Follow your gut, her sergeant said. She couldn't escape the image of Xander staring at his feet, unwilling to answer her questions. Unwilling or unable? Her stomach growled. Right now, her gut wanted to lead her to the drive-thru. No point lingering. The missing person had been found, and she could do nothing more. I won't give up on you, Xander. You know, this feels like completely in line with your bigger project, RSAlessi, because it's, again, I think, cozy thriller. Or cozy, what is it? It's like cozy supernatural with thriller, but it's cozy in the way that it's like domesticated. Because the other stories also got domestication, but it's not cozy in the sense that it has non-detectives involved, because the other story that you're working on, the bigger one, also has detectives involved, but also has like the domestication aspect to it. And I feel like this is so on brand for you. And I could see so many different types of setups where you've got a detective on the outside looking into this weird situation. Same with your other bigger story. I think it's kind of funny. Just how on brand this is for your style, from what I know about your style. But it is so very you. Also, always so good with the character interactions, the character dialogue, the character voices, and just being like, there is something weird going on here, and getting us, connected with the POV character that is the detective here, or the police officer here. She seems like such a normal person, but also just like, I have to get involved in this bizarre situation. Anyway, that was fun. Assuming this is part of, I think, your greater universe over there that you're working on with your other thing, I'm very excited to see more. I know how much thought you put into your editing and stuff, and so don't know when we'll get it, but your characters are always very interesting to see interact. So those were the stories this month for LMIAY. If you would like to possibly be in the next month's LMIAY, check out the link down in the description below for the new prompt. And thank you to everybody for submitting. Let me know what your guys' favorite story this month was down in the comments. And I'll see you around in the next video. Have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out? The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him. Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left. Plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?